Hi, how are you?
Hi Felicia, how are you doing?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Congratulations on passing your PMP exam. How are you feeling?
Relieved? Happy it's over.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the time for this lessons learned session. This would be really helpful for anyone who would be watching. So let's
Cool.
start with your brief introduction, specifically your project management experience.
Yeah, so I've been a project manager for mm, 6, 7 years now. I work in the life sciences industry. So I worked, my first project management job was at Janssen as a contractor, and now I've been working with Rancho Biosciences.
All right. And when did you start your PMP preparation journey?
I started back in June. So started, by um, going through the application, kind of trying to figure out what did I need, did I have everything that I needed, and then trying to find the right course for my PMP. I signed up for my course sometime in end of June, beginning of July, and then took the course in August. After I took the course in August, uh, went through the rest of the process with the application and eventually took the test.
All right. How much total time you spent in preparation? Like, what was your study time?
Yeah, so I took the course, and that was a huge portion of my study time. Honestly, there was a lot that was taught in your course that just wasn't in the content anywhere. Um, my notes from that course were the majority of my study materials, honestly. And then I actually only got 4 days of study time before the exam. I had the flu. I had planned for 14. I have two young kids and a full time job and stuff, so I didn't have months and stuff to prepare and dedicate. So yeah, I had 4 days, unfortunately, um, but I managed. So
What did you do during those 4 days?
I read through my notes and I took practice exams and tried to figure out what areas I wasn't doing well in. I had like a little scratch paper next to me when I was taking my practice exams to write down things that I was like, oh, I'm not really sure about this one, or I don't really remember this from the notes. And then after I take the exam, I go back and try and figure out, what concept was I missing, fill in the blanks and then go from there.
Did you read any book?
Uh, I did buy the Rita McCauley's book, and I read through probably half of it. Um, I did take all of the practice tests though in there. Again, I really focused on, since I had limited time, trying to identify what areas I didn't know well, and then go back and learn those areas and focus on them. So,
All right. How many questions you solved before the test?
how many questions? Oh my gosh, probably 2,000. I did a lot of tests.
And what was your average score in those tests?
I was averaging between the high 80s and low 90s on most of those tests. I mean, obviously, I got better with time, but
Absolutely. Anything more than 70 is great. Like if you're getting 70% means you're ready to write the exam. Okay, now
mhm.
let's talk about your exam experience. So were you able to manage time during the exam?
Yes, I managed my time pretty well during the exam. I basically took the allotted time, broke it up by three, and said, "This is how much I have to do each part." I tried not to flag too many questions, but I also tried to I try not to spend too much time on a question. If I was stumped or if I uh, just couldn't really think about that at the moment, it wasn't coming to me. I was like, "All right, skip it and move on to the next question." So by the end of each section, I think I only had about 5 or 7 questions flagged from each. I monitored the time and went back and focused on the ones that I didn't answer first. And then if I had remaining time, I would go into the next one. I ended up finishing, I think, about 45 minutes early. So I managed my time pretty well.
All right. And what was the distribution of questions in terms of different methodologies like agile, waterfall, or hybrid, if you could recall?
Yeah. So I'd say it was about um, probably 40% agile and 40%, 45, maybe 50% waterfall, and then a small portion of hybrid. So maybe like 10% of the questions were hybrid.
Absolutely. So yes, agile and waterfall are really important for your exam. 40, that's right. And if you could recall, what are the important topics where students should focus on, like in terms of domains, people, process, or in terms of topics that or lessons that we discussed?
Uh, the main thing you should focus on is understanding the concept, not understanding. Don't go for like rote memorization. I know there was like PMP games where you could memorize the processes and all this stuff and the ITTOs. The exam asked for none of those specifics. It was more focused on, do you understand why we do what we do? Like, why did somebody take the time to put together a standard for how to manage projects? So I would focus on that. If you come across something and you're like, I don't understand why this exists, or I don't understand why I would use this, that is where you need to focus. You need to go back and figure out why these things are in place.
Absolutely. And we talked about different topics during the course, like we discussed
Yes.
scope management, risk management, cost management, people management, motivation, negotiation. Are there any topics which you think are more important as compared to others?
I I didn't notice that one was more prevalent than others in my exam. Now I don't know if that's different for each exam. Um, I did notice though that there was a lot of people management questions. So I felt like there was a significant amount of you're dealing with a person or you're dealing with a situation. How are you going to deal with this person or this situation? I did feel like there was a lot of those.
Absolutely. People management is really, really important for your exam. Absolutely. Were there anything in exam that we couldn't discuss during the course or you couldn't go through during the entire study process?
No, no, honestly, I was rather surprised at how well I had prepared. I actually felt like I probably was over prepared, which sounds silly because I only prepped for 4 days. But yeah, it was very much things that were either intuitive or things that you had to just conceptually know or don't know.
Absolutely. And did you see any question in the exam where you had to do some mathematical calculation?
No, I was expecting calculation exam questions, especially because they gave me a calculator when I showed up. But there were no actual figures that you had to calculate. There were a couple of situations. The only way that I saw calculations was where they gave you the figures pre-calculated and then asked you like, what does this mean, or how would you translate these things?
Absolutely. Anything that you think you should not have done during the entire preparation process?
Sorry, say that again.
Anything that you should not have done? Or what are the don'ts of PMP exam journey?
Um, don't try to memorize anything. I did try to memorize the processes. Um, I did get very nervous about like the inputs and the outputs and the tools and techniques. Um, I figured like maybe I wasn't prepared because I didn't know all of them off the back of my head. But I noticed that they weren't even really a part of the exam. It was more so um, understanding what is a tool versus what is a tool and a technique versus an input and output. Understanding, how these things work together and the concept behind them. So yeah, don't. I spent time playing this PMP process game and trying to get 100, and I did not need that at all. Waste my time.
Absolutely. And anything that you found challenging or difficult during the entire process? Anything that you think it is challenging?
Um, you know, I didn't find anything overtly challenging during the process. I'm sorry, I do have a small child.
Okay.
Um, I didn't find anything overly challenging. I think the biggest challenge is trying to determine where you need to spend your time. Everyone's going to be different. Everyone's going to have a different amount of or level of understanding before they go into it. Everyone's going to have different specialties or sorry.
It's
This is
okay.
why
Hi.
This is why I only got a few days to study. Say hi. Um, and I think one of the most challenging parts was trying to figure there's thousands of pages of content. And if you go onto the web and you start Googling like PMP content or how to prepare, there's so much. It's very, very overwhelming. So for me, that was the most challenging part was like, where do I start? what do I need to start with? And that's why I took the approach of starting to just take tests and figure out where I was. Where could I do better? Where was I performing well? And then going back and reviewing those sections, because it's honestly there's so much, especially if you start going into the web and looking around. I mean, um, it's very, very easily overwhelming for a lot of people. So that's the most challenging part. I think people could very easily get hung up trying to read all of the content or rote memorization, but uh, trying to stay focused on the ECO and focusing on how you're doing in those domains during the test, and then going back and preparing on those specific areas. That's probably the biggest challenge, honestly.
Absolutely, absolutely, you're right. And you have gone through the entire process. How helpful for this, for your professional learning and development, apart from just passing the exam?
You know, um, it showed me a whole different way or a whole different perspective on how to approach project management. Obviously, project management is different in every single business, in every single company that you work for. They all have their own processes, they all have their own ways to do things. But one of the big things that I learned was the huge importance of planning and preparation. As a project manager, that's really the part where you need to put the most work in. And if you do that, I learned from the PMP prep that if you do that, you have a much easier time with the rest of the project, and things go a lot smoother. Um, so kind of learning how to front load your time as a project manager. I think time management is a huge challenge because you have such limited time. You have a lot of projects, you have a lot of teams, you have a lot of team members. Um, and that for me was the biggest learning, was now moving forward, really taking the time to plan, taking the time to put in that front loaded work so that I could have an easier course throughout the rest of the project.
Absolutely. Last question, Felicia. How did you find motivation to prepare for the exam? Because with all the responsibilities, job, family, friends, how did you find time?
um, I made time. I put these kids to sleep, and then I studied until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. When I took your course, I took it during my job hours, so I took it as a learning and development opportunity. So I tried to build in as much as I could into my existing day that was already planned out. But my biggest motivation was honestly, getting this for my career so that I could advance my career, and of course be better, provide a better life for my daughter and my son, and for us to move forward. So
Absolutely fantastic. Once again, congratulations, Felicia,
thank
and
you.
thank you for the time for this lesson learned session. This would be really helpful for everybody who would be watching. Once again, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.